if we cannot trust our Prime Minister to tell the truth about this ambassadorial appointment, the whole, full truth, a key appointment in Britain's national security architecture, it calls into question the assurances he gives us on everything else. His promises to control taxes, which he has broken. His promises not to raise borrowing, which he has broken. Promises to back business, protect our veterans, defend our farmers, and prioritise growth, all of which he has broken. And he has broken them because at his core, he is a man with no idea what he believes. Worse still, he appears to have no interest in doing the job of Prime Minister, just in being the Prime Minister. Curiosity is what drives serious leadership. Without curiosity, problems are neither fully understood nor solved. And this whole affair just goes to show why this country is heading in such a woeful direction under the Prime Minister's incurious regime. His defence yesterday summed it up. He says that no one told him and that he never thought to ask. This is, in his own words, incredible. But even if we take the Prime Minister at his word, even if we believe the unbelievable, it is no better. He appointed Mandelson despite knowing that he was a threat to our national security. He said due process was followed, having failed to follow that process himself, and he pressured the Foreign Office into signing off on this appointment. In 2022, the Prime Minister said, "I believe that if you're the leader, the buck stops with you." He said, "I will always stand up for my team, but I will also take responsibility for everything they do." That is what leadership is. How has he taken responsibility? It is clear that the Prime Minister has no intention of facing up to his mistakes. It's clear now that he is not a leader and he has no intention of doing the honourable thing.
On that point, will the Right Honourable Lady give way?
Yes, I will give way.
I congratulate her on securing this debate and indeed on eviscerating the Prime Minister in her speech. Does she not believe, however, that the sorry souls opposite us should have to put their money where their mouth is and that there should be a vote of no confidence in this Prime Minister in due course?
The Right Honourable Gentleman makes a very good point. I think he is right, because I don't believe the Prime Minister has the intention of doing the honourable thing himself, even though that's the standard to which he held everyone else. The decision, as I said, about whether he will ultimately take responsibility for his actions is now up to Labour MPs. We heard many powerful statements from that side of the House yesterday. Labour MPs know that the Prime Minister has let the country down, he's let Parliament down, and he's also let the Labour Party down.
Why was it that a group of people in Number 10, and possibly the Prime Minister as well, felt that that level of pressure should be placed on the Foreign Office in favour of appointing...
All right, guys, listen carefully. This is where everything begins to fall apart. A Prime Minister accused of not telling the full truth about a critical ambassadorial appointment tied directly to national security. And if the truth is compromised here, then what else can be trusted? Promises on taxes, borrowing, businesses, veterans, all broken. This isn't just political failure. This is a pattern. A leader without direction, without conviction, and worse, without accountability. And when leadership loses curiosity, it loses control. That's exactly how a nation starts drifting into chaos.
Mandelson. And I think there are two possible answers, but let me focus on one. I think that the political unit in Number 10, and possibly the Prime Minister too, wanted Mandelson because he was their close political ally and because he was plugged into a vast international network of what we might call the billionaire class. The truth is that much of the nectars of wealth which Mandelson was plugging into, but so was the President, by the way, was centred around Epstein. And let me just pause in my narrative for a second. None of this debate, none of these facts would emerge were it not for the courage and bravery and resistance of the women who had been treated so appallingly on Epstein Island. But getting Mandelson into Washington as part of that network was the highest priority. A political network of highly reimbursed billionaires, frankly. All of this leaves a bad taste. The government had promised change to the people, but the change which they saw in the end was further to accelerate the integration of the British state and government into the networks of the richest people. But people in our country, certainly in my constituency, didn't vote for that. They wanted a change for their ordinary lives, a better NHS, cost of living improvements and so on and so forth. Well, we've got a long way to go to deliver that, but we did deliver a disaster with the appointment of Mandelson. I've raised the question of unemployment 4 times in recent months. Growing unemployment in our area. It's hard to see how the time which was spent by the government ingratiating ourselves to Washington would really help the unemployed and the poor. And just think about Mandelson's business involvement with Russia and China. So obnoxious is China supposed to be? I think I'm right in saying that this building has spanned all Chinese-based networks, as though these are the agencies of an enemy state. How could it be that Mandelson's links were seen to be of such a low risk? And when it comes to Russia, this House has spent literally hours discussing the appalling behaviour of Putin and Russia in relation to the east of Europe. All of these should have counted against Mandelson, but they were weighed in the balance and they counted less than the opportunity which Mandelson presumably offered as his access to a network of people, which included the President. So I want to be very quick. I've made a case. I'm going to just make one final point. Mandelson had played a key role in a faction which sought to change the strategic direction of our party, the Labour Party, and of the government. The truth is, they wanted to change the Labour Party into something it never was. I will do, but very briefly.
I thank the member for giving way. I thank the member.
Now here's where things get even more disturbing. The defense? I didn't know. I didn't ask. Think about that. Even if we believe that, which is hard enough, it's still catastrophic, because either he ignored the risks or deliberately avoided them. Manderson's appointment wasn't accidental. It was pushed, pressured, and forced through the system. Due process? Completely undermined. This wasn't leadership. This was manipulation. And when a prime minister refuses responsibility, hides behind excuses, and avoids scrutiny, it raises one brutal question. Is he protecting the country or protecting himself?
Way, and he's making an excellent and very important speech. On the point about Labour Together, is he aware that most of the supporters, and indeed, as I understand it, the bankrollers of Labour Together, had nothing whatsoever to do with the traditions of the Labour movement? It was merely using a name in order to try and change the nature of the Labour Party away from its traditional socialist objectives.
Well, I have had a debate previously on Labour Together, so I'll leave the comments which my right friend has made to stand for themselves. This was a faction which sought to change the Labour Party in something it never was. And if we continue down the path which has been chosen, I fear that we are in a downward spiral from which we will not escape.
This is a mess of the government's own making. A mess born out of a futile attempt to appease Donald Trump. And a mess that just keeps getting worse with today's revelations, uncovered by my honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, that the Prime Minister pushed for the appointment as ambassador of another Labour crony with ties to a sex offender. Catastrophically bad judgments that have created a mess that has distracted and consumed this government and stopped it from focusing on what the British people actually need. Because the people out there don't want more Westminster drama. They're thinking about the hospital appointment that keeps getting pushed back, the mortgage payments that just seem to keep going up, the loved ones who need care but is stuck on a waiting list, the threats to our national security from an ever more dangerous world. Those are the things that keep people up at night. And they deserve a Prime Minister and a government that is focused on them. Our party will never stop making that case. We will never stop holding this government to account, not for the sake of political point scoring, but on behalf of the British people who deserve better than this. Mr. Speaker, The last Conservative government failed our country by getting stuck in a cycle of chaos and scandal and refusing to move on. The question for the Labour Party is whether they will repeat that mistake or finally deliver the change our country needs.
Number 10 has chosen to ignore these things. And that's critical. Because we've heard already about the pressure put on the Foreign Office over and over again. And forgive me again, Mr. Speaker, but for the direct quote, because it's obscene, but the chairman actually recounted how Morgan Sweeney called Sir Ollie's predecessor and told him, quotes, just fucking approve it. Now, speaking to the committee, he made clear he was under constant pressure and there was an atmosphere of constant chasing. Why? Well, we already know it's not because Mandelson was a materially better candidate than Karen Pierce, the brilliant, well-established, highly regarded incumbent with excellent connections to the White House. It was because Mandelson was a leading member of the new Labour aristocracy. Full stop. Not talent.
All right, now let's talk about power, real power. Because this wasn't just about one appointment. This was about influence, connections, and elite networks operating behind closed doors. Mandelson wasn't chosen randomly. He was deeply tied into global billionaire circles, networks that stretch far beyond politics. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Those networks intersect with some of the darkest scandals in recent history. So ask yourself, was this about national interest or about access to power? Because to ordinary people struggling with bills, healthcare, and survival, this looks like betrayal.
Connection. It wasn't even, it's not in the national interest, plainly, it wasn't even in the Labour interest. It was in the interest of a Labour clique. Now, Mandel's appointment was a decision in complete disregard of the risks, known risks, which explains the Prime Minister's lack of curiosity about the vetting. It wasn't lack of curiosity. He did not ask because he did not want to know. The former Cabinet Secretary warned the Prime Minister he should secure Mandelson's security clearance before the appointment. He was warned on the 11th of December by the Cabinet Office about his past, his public past. And on the 11th of September last year, number 10 was asked by a journalist whether Mandelson had failed to develop vetting. Number 10 knew. It's as plain as a pikestone. So, where do we go from here? We have a Prime Minister and a government in power who are making decisions in the interests of their own clique within their own party. And they're making their interests at the explicit risk of the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister should resign.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Peter Mandelson once spoke of the Labour left being sealed in a tomb. Today, it is the toxic politics he came to represent that should be buried. Politics that repels millions and drifts far from the values on which our party was founded. If we are serious about renewal, serious about learning the lessons of this troubling episode, then we must confront that culture, what enabled it. That means looking at figures such as the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, a protege of Mandelson's, and of the network of influence around him. Mandelson's appointment did not happen in isolation, as we learn today. It reflects a wider direction under the Prime Minister, where those behind the Labour Together project wielded significant influence in developing this toxic culture, which has been allowed to take hold of number 10 in the governing of our country. It points to a political culture that lacks candour, exists to promote wealth and power, and ignores all else in pursuit of this. It's a culture where proximity to power outweighs principle, where access counts far more than accountability, and where the suffering of victims is overshadowed by connections. When decisions are driven by patronage and power is concentrated in a narrow circle, it is not only our internal party democracy that suffers, but the integrity of our public institutions and our country. And too often, it is our civil servants, those who serve with professionalism and integrity, who are left to carry the consequences. I want to commend Sir Ollie Robbins for giving evidence today. His professionalism and dedication after a week where he has been very publicly hounded by some in governments was commendable. And it was good to see his trade union back them steadfastly at the committee today. Robbins will be a loss to the FCDO and the country, all brought about by a series of catastrophic political decisions.
Listen, This is where the system starts exposing itself. Warnings were given, clear warnings, security concerns flagged, advice ignored, and still, the appointment moved forward at speed. Why? Because the decision wasn't about merit. It wasn't about safety. It was about loyalty to a political clique, a closed circle making decisions for their own benefit. And when leaders stop asking questions, it's not ignorance, it's intention. They didn't want answers. They didn't want obstacles. They wanted control. And that kind of governance?
That is not right, not fair, and it's not what the public expects of elected officials. And because of this, the public will rightly demand accountability and cultural change. This must begin with a thorough review of the political operation which brought the Prime Minister to power and which clearly continues to carry undue influence over this government. So I once again, as I have asked on multiple occasions, now in both letters to the Prime Minister and speeches in this place, call for a full, transparent and independent investigation into the activities and practices of Labour Together, both prior to and after the election of this government. Only then will we fully understand how this exclusive political network has been able to undermine our democracy and institutions right at the heart of government.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister apologised to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, but where was that sense of responsibility when he made the decision regarding Peter Mandelson? And where was that sense of responsibility when he actively chose to ignore information that was already in the public domain? This morning, the Energy Secretary said, Prime Ministers make errors, Prime Ministers are fallible, Prime Ministers are human, but I'm struggling to understand how the gravity of misjudgment in this political appointment can be explained away as a simple human error. This is not a split-second judgment. This was not a decision made of urgent necessity under pressure in the heat of the moment. This was a deliberate, considered political appointment made in full knowledge of the political priorities involved. Morgan McSweeney even swore it through. What is more is that members on the opposite benches were given lines to take yesterday, prompted to quote a victim of Epstein in defence of the Prime Minister. And when Mandelson was appointed last year, their suffering was of no consequence to the government when they weighed it in the scales and found which side they wanted to come down on. In truth, it is thanks to the bravery of victims like Virginia Giuffre that Epstein's crimes are even in the public domain. Her sister-in-law, Amanda Roberts, said this about Mandelson's sacking last year. Our governments have allowed these people to hold their status and their title without shame. It is unfair we continuously pull these skeletons out, that survivors have to continuously point the finger for us to do the right thing. These were women and children who were trafficked and abused by a network of men who acted with confidence that they were untouchable, too powerful to challenge and too protected ever to be brought down. And truly it raises the uncomfortable question of whether Peter Mandelson's familiarity with that world was treated as a skill set rather than a red flag. Was he chosen precisely because he was comfortable rubbing shoulders with the sort of men who shared private jets with Epstein, rather than in spite of it? So how can the Prime Minister now express sympathy for victims of crimes committed by a man whose closest associates he chose to elevate? How can he claim to share their pain when he made himself the very decision that caused such distress for them? And just this morning, Sir Ollie Robbins told the Foreign Affairs Select Committee that Downing Street asked the Foreign...
Intro 5. Now, let's get real for a second. This isn't just political drama. This is about morality, victims of abuse, survivors of exploitation. Their voices brought these truths into the light, and yet, despite everything being publicly known, decisions were still made that ignored those realities. That's not just poor judgment. That's a failure of humanity. When power protects power and connections outweigh consequences, the system stops serving people. And the question becomes unavoidable. Was this appointment a mistake? Or was it deliberate?
To find a senior diplomatic role for the Prime Minister's then communications chief, Matt Doyle, even though Doyle had campaigned for a friend charged with possessing indecent images of children. This is the government that promised to turn the page on Tory sleaze and restore trust and integrity to British politics. Instead, not once, but twice, the Prime Minister pressured the civil service to appoint friends of known sex offenders to senior diplomatic roles. To close, Madam Deputy Speaker, the facts were known, the associations were known, the public record was clear, this was a public decision, it was a wrong decision of such magnitude that the only conclusion will be to end the Starmer administration. And that is when the Labour Party, of course, decides to do it, because that is the Labour Party's responsibility.
But today I thought we had something really very intriguing take place, which is we had the person that had just been sacked brought to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee to give testimony about what this was all about. And what we really learned was how much that this government had wanted, for some reason, Peter Mandelson to take over that job of being ambassador, that they drove everything aside in the pursuit of this, bullying civil servants, essentially sacking one of them because he didn't give the answers, it appears, that they wanted, and excusing themselves on the basis that everybody else was wrong and they were right. Well, they weren't, and this has now come home to roost. And so the essential fact of this is, you know, many of us knew about Mandelson's activities. I have literally here a great dossier on him about his links with China, hundreds of names to do with the people he had met and who he had been giving details of all sorts of things to. We know now that he lobbied the government. He lobbied them over electric vehicles and the tariff. Outrageous, really, continued to put pressure on them, even when he was given the job. That is the nature of the man, still repaying his links back to China. And we've heard from my honourable friend about his links with Sistema in Russia. But there's copious evidence, even on those alone, why Peter Mandelson should never have been allowed in any government post whatsoever before there was any attempt to inspect that. It was in the public domain, and there is no way on earth that the right honourable gentleman is going to get up here and talk about faults within the system and not getting clarity. Nonsense. Everybody that wanted to know knew. We knew about it. In the Interparliamentary Alliance for China, we had all the details. They were published. There is no excuse for the government to say we waited for the Foreign Office to deliver this great thing and they didn't tell us. They knew. Number one, they knew. And the second point about this is the way they manipulated this, which is shocking, absolutely shocking. The outgoing Cabinet Secretary, after what he saw in the Cabinet Office's review of this, the due diligence, which, by the way...
All right, now we're entering dangerous territory, because what we're seeing isn't just incompetence, it's active disregard, links to global powers, questionable associations, lobbying influence, all ignored. Evidence was available, public, documented, and still the system pushed forward. Civil servants pressured, processes bypassed, warnings dismissed. This wasn't a breakdown, this was a decision. A calculated move that put political interests above national security. And when that happens, the damage isn't temporary. It cuts deep into the foundation of trust.
It's not the same as what the Foreign Office was doing. This was a search through to have a look and recommendations to government. They showed just how tainted this man was, this corrupt man and corrupting man, how tainted he was and what he had been up to. And seeing that, he made the advice to government, which is the job of a cabinet secretary, that you shouldn't go ahead to a point, you should wait for this full review to take place, and one way or the other for him to be cleared or not cleared. But the government didn't do that, and that's the other question. In what world would they go ahead, despite that advice, sensible, reasonable advice? Why do they press on? Not only do they press on, but at such speed, and they put the King, His Majesty the King, in the firing line on this. You know, it's here, they approve the appointment, and it goes to the King, because they've now declared it, even though they haven't had clearance. The agreement has been given to the US partners. What in heaven's name could have happened later on? And none of the stuff to do with Epstein was even in the middle of this argument, which it would become. So the man is utterly corrupt, and they want him as our ambassador. And he's given highly... And this is the other bit about today that I found astonishing. The admission by the ex-permanent secretary, Ollie Robbins, that he understood that despite the fact that he wasn't cleared, he had been given strap clearance to see documents of such importance that they could have brought the government and the country down. And I'm going to end on this, Madam Deputy Speaker, because you've been most tolerant. I simply say this. The Prime Minister is in the firing line on this one for very good reasons. He's in charge, and he knew what was going on. The people he sacked are still in the firing line because they cannot weasel out of this. They committed an offence in the books of anybody in this single chamber. And the right honourable gentleman will be in the firing line because he's been put here to literally try and tell some story about how this was none of the Prime Minister's fault. He has been economical with the actuality and terminally inexact. And all I can say is no more terminal inexactitudes, please, when he gets to the dispatch box.
Dr. Ali Chow.
One thing that strikes me in all of this is that this is called the House of Commons. Our job is to come here and represent the common person. And it is so far removed from the common person, this entire debate. As I said last night, if one of my constituents in Lagan Valley is accidentally overpaid on a benefit, that's clawed back. No matter the cost to that person, the human cost, that's clawed back right away. No questions asked, no special circumstances, and we see that writ large across our public life. And the reason being is because we said that we valued a rules-based, ordered system.
Let's break this down simply. The people, the ordinary citizens, they don't care about political jargon or technical excuses. They care about fairness. They care about integrity. And what they're seeing right now, a completely different set of rules for those in power. One mistake by a citizen, punished immediately. But at the highest level, excuses, delays, denial. That double standard is what fuels anger. That's what destroys trust. And once people lose trust in leadership, the consequences don't stay in Parliament. They spread across the entire country.
We wanted a society that was fair, and we valued integrity, and we valued trust, but more importantly, we wanted to understand that the people that came to this house were going to act in a way that was beyond reproach, that was going to act in a way that they expected everyone else across the UK to behave. Now I have a guy, disabled, accidentally parked in a parking space, didn't have his blue badge displayed, and he's getting hammered. He's getting hammered. Maybe he'll get off, who knows. But we are dealing with a situation where the Prime Minister of the day is now saying that he regrets the appointment of Mandelson. And I'm not going to get into the whys and wherefores of DV and strap and CTC and everything else, because my people in Lagan Valley don't know what that means. And a lot of people are banking on the ordinary man and woman on the street not to know what that means, and to stop being curious, and to suspend their expectations, because this is all highfalutin serious stuff and we don't really know what that is. Maybe they did do right, maybe they didn't do right, because they're bamboozled. But I'm going to break it down for them. I would say this to the Prime Minister. What was it about the twice disgraced, paedophile adjacent, self-styled Prince of Darkness that you found so attractive to put into this plum job, not just of government, but of the United Kingdom on the world stage? What was it, Prime Minister, that appealed to you about Peter Mandelson? We still don't have the answer. We still don't have the answer. But all I know is that my constituents are disgusted with all of this. And this isn't the first time, it's not the second time, it's not the third time. It has been going round in a merry-go-round no matter who it is. And I'm really glad that the member for Liverpool West Derby is in the chamber, because he has worked tirelessly to make sure that issues at the nub of this, the duty of candour, the obligation to be honest with the public, let alone your colleagues and the entire administration. And yet we're telling families that they can't access documents for another 100 years. due to technicality? How am I making that make sense to them? And I am indignant, and I am outraged. And a lot of people in this building are expecting us to no longer be outraged. We'll be outraged. Because if we can't prove that this works, we know he's going to step into the shadows. We know he's going to be out there setting the algorithms. We know who is going to be preying on the carcass of what was a once great democracy. And we've seen other democracies fail. Let's not fool ourselves that the UK is immune from this. And the number one thing we can do within our gift is to show that we still value integrity. And for those reasons, there is not a single excuse that this government can come up with that I can sell to my constituents or myself that I will believe. And for those reasons, I believe that the Prime Minister needs to go, not just for his own party, but more importantly, for the sake.
So here we are, the final question. What kind of leadership does a nation deserve? Because this isn't just about one man or one decision. It's about a system that allowed it to happen. A culture where influence beats integrity, where power avoids accountability. And if that culture isn't challenged now, it doesn't just continue. It grows. People are watching. They're frustrated. And they're demanding answers. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about politics. It's about trust. And once that's gone, everything else follows.